Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. Thank you for joining me for this week's show, episode 212. Before we jump into this week's topic, living a life trapped taking care of someone else who is sick, if you find this podcast helpful, please like it and follow it on your favorite podcast app. Your participation through likes and follows helps the show reach more people worldwide looking for hope, help, and support for their health or when caring for aging or elderly parents, spouses, other family members, or friends. Are you a caregiver, living life and feeling trapped, taking care of someone else who is sick? If so, have you considered that the person you care for feels as trapped as you do? Have you heard the saying, the grass always looks greener on the other side? Well, that's until you get to the other side. During this program, I'll share 2 examples of a caregiver becoming dependent on a spouse or aging parent for housing and money because the caregiver chose to give up their independence to be a caregiver, or maybe it's a spousal situation. And I'll share the other side of the person needing care being fully dependent on a spouse, adult child, or another family member. These scenarios also apply to caregivers who may be working and devoting all of their free time to care for a loved one. It's easy for anyone in a care situation to have a one-sided perspective. Caregivers, what they see is the time and attention they devote to care for a loved one versus what they've given up in their life. It's not until a person is on the other side of the fence, being sick, needing care, dealing with one health problem after another that keep adding up, that it's possible to understand what it's like to be sick, to need care, to depend on someone else, and in the midst of all that, experience constant worry and anxiety about health conditions and what is going to happen next. Regardless of what side of the grass and the fence you're living on, living a life trapped, taking care of someone else who is sick, or living in the body of a sick person who needs care, growing your level of compassion and patience, and being practical and realistic about what is possible can improve your day-to-day situation. If you're a caregiver whose daily life is affected by taking care of a sick person, you might feel exhausted, resentful, or angry. Agreeing to become a caregiver for a family member benefits from early conversations and written plans that clearly document what is being agreed to, especially if a financial benefit is being extended either direction. The caregiver to the care receiver, or the care receiver to the caregiver. Don't be so naive to think that just because you are family members, written agreements are not necessary. They are. It is because you are a family member that writing this information down, documenting agreements, documenting what you're doing, and especially documenting the financial arrangements are especially important, even going to the extent of having these agreements looked at by an attorney, notarized, witnessed by other people in your family, because doing this can avoid a lot of problems later down the road, especially if other family members think that your intentions or what you did were not totally honorable. So let's talk more about this caregiver relationship. Let's be honest. Having another person depending on you for all of their daily needs can be physically and emotionally draining. Maybe you're tired of doing everything you can. Your sick loved one's health only seems to be getting worse instead of better. If you are a parent and you raise children, you might have looked forward to the day your kids grew up and moved out of the house so that you could have your life back. After only a few years of freedom from family caregiving, you are back at it as a caregiver. While there may be breaks from caregiving throughout life, in one way or another, the responsibilities return, whether a person is managing their own health problems or caring for someone else. If you are a caregiver, you know that these responsibilities can last for years, more years than you ever expected. On the other hand, people diagnosed with chronic health conditions can have one health problem that leads to the next and the next and the next. The difference between being a caregiver, raising children to the age of when those children move out of the house, is that the person you care for is an adult with a lot of life experience, excluding a diagnosis of any type of memory loss. No dementia, no Alzheimer's, no MS, no Parkinson's. People with health problems can still have rational conversations. More of the challenge is dealing with individual and cultural beliefs about health, managing health, and caregiving responsibilities. If you are the sick person who needs care, you might be angry at the world and your caregiver. Maybe you're so exhausted that you're just not motivated to get out of bed in the morning. You might be tired of doctors and your caregiver telling you what to do so that you can feel better or do better. Maybe you just want to give up. Giving up is a choice you can make. It's an option. But if you choose to give up, you must then give up the expectation that your husband or wife, son, daughter, other family members must give up their lives, their dreams, their careers to care for you 24/7. Misery may love company, but it doesn't make for good companions in a caregiving relationship. So, in this case, we might have two people, both exhausted, the caregiver and the person who needs care. One, the caregiver wants their life back, and the person who needs care may want to be left alone to live out their life and not be told what to do. With these opposing goals, is it a good situation for these two people to continue living together or being in a caregiver-care receiver relationship? Maybe not. This is a question rarely asked because the answer may necessitate change. So let's look at two examples, two scenarios of a caregiver who chose to live with a sick person, or vice versa, and the caregiver becomes financially dependent on the care receiver for a house and their daily needs. While caregivers in these situations often say, "Oh, I had no choice," any person in this situation chose to be there through their actions, behaviors, and beliefs, which in many cases includes the belief that this is what a good husband or wife, this is what a good son or daughter would do. If you're a caregiver who has taken care of someone who is sick for years, you're probably in a routine. Changing this routine will take work if you want to change your life and your situation. For example, if you've given up your job, getting another job may be the hardest thing you will ever have to do. If you've relied on the income of the sick person to support you, you may be comfortable but quite miserable. If you are the sick person who just wants to live out your life, but you need care, you will need a caregiver. If that caregiver isn't your family member, who is it? Where will you receive care? You see, in this situation, as bad as it may be, there are two people who have worked themselves into a daily routine and into a difficult situation, such that making the choice to change may be feared, may be dreaded, because that change is going to upset this daily routine that isn't ideal, but it sure is comfortable. Bringing the idea of growing in compassion in the situation and agreeing that change must occur, what can the caregiver and the sick person do? Let me share a couple of options, and there are definitely more. Number one, accept the current situation with all of the difficult choices and the steps that have to be made. 2, the home may need to be sold to pay for the sick person's care. 3, if the caregiver was financially dependent on a place to live and income from the sick person, the caregiver will have to get a job and find another place to live. 4, the sick person needs to get the house ready to sell and find a care community. This may include completing a Medicaid application. These changes do not and will not happen overnight. So the best thing the caregiver and the sick person can do is to sit down, figure out a plan, put a timeline together, put it on a calendar, while being as compassionate and patient and kind to each other as possible. This is called putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. Now let's look at example or scenario number 2. The caregiver and the sick person, while miserable, don't want to make a change. They agreed that they are in this together for the long run. What can be done so each person is less miserable? Options include, number 1, setting boundaries. I will do this, you will do that. Number 2, the caregiver creates a life outside of caregiving, which includes getting a paid job. 3, the sick person pays for a caregiver to come into the home or accesses the state Medicaid program so that a caregiver comes into the home if there isn't money to pay for care. Number 4, if necessary, the sick person agrees to go to an adult day program so the family caregiver can be gone all day at work. These changes may be as difficult as scenario number 1, but they are necessary so each person can extend compassion about the challenges of the other person and each person's right to live their life in a way that does not negatively affect the life and the rights of the other person in this relationship to be happy, to be more self-sufficient, and to be independent. In both of these examples, the caregiver must acknowledge how they came to be dependent on living in the home and being financially supported by the sick person. The sick person must recognize the time commitment that the caregiver devoted to their care and agree that the caregiver has a right to reestablish a life that is not solely dedicated to being a full-time caregiver. Other agreements in either scenario include listening to each other with no judgment. Remember, until you're in the shoes of the other person, it's hard to imagine daily life experiences. Speaking kindly and doing things must become mandatory, even when the other person loses patience or is having a bad day. Some caregivers say to me, "My mother or father is mean all the time. It would be so nice if at least once I could hear a thank you." For the caregiver and care receiver, practicing self-compassion for the current situation is critical. Each person in any situation got themselves there through their beliefs and their actions. Each person is responsible for their actions. All of this, including life, can be really hard if one is not flexible in their beliefs. It's easy to get in a routine and deny that it will take effort to change, or to even believe that there are other options for a situation to change. Many caregivers and care receivers find themselves in a close-minded position. That will not help you change. Whatever situation you find yourself in today, it is possible to change. Change will require physical and mental work, meaning that first of all, you have to believe change can happen. Then put in the effort to Figure out options. Make it happen. Set a timeline. The more embedded you are in a care situation, the longer it can take for change to happen. So if you're feeling trapped today by taking care of a sick person, or you are a sick person feeling trapped, begin having compassionate conversations to understand each other's opinions, beliefs, needs, and wants, which may not match up. If you're both unhappy, choose to do something differently. Make a different plan. If one of you is happy and the other is not, begin setting boundaries to move your life ahead. By you changing, the other person will have to change. For situations to change, one person must have that courage and that belief to start the change process. You can be that person. If you need help with identifying options or making a plan to change, visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on the Services tab, and then Elder Care Consultation, where you can learn how I help individuals and families plan, work through challenging situations, and on that page, you can complete a request form to schedule a 30 or 60-minute consultation with me. I thank you so much for being here. Please do like and follow this podcast on your favorite app. Share it with others you know who are seeking hope, help, and support. The show transcript, along with this podcast and a video, are on my website at PamelaDWilson.com. Go to the Media tab and then the Caring Generation podcast. Scroll down and look for episode 212. I'm Pamela D. Wilson, a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. You're with me on the Caring Generation podcast. I look forward to being with you again soon. God bless you all. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day tomorrow. And make the most of every day until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for the Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.